go.
Okay, so my presentation is about the use of pitch correction on vocals in popular music. I wanted to explore this topic because pitch correction is kind of unique in the modern music climate because it is so ubiquitous, but often when people talk about it, there is kind of a stigma associated with it. You're kind of in the position where you either really, really do get it, or you really don't. So I think I wanted to explore it just because I don't necessarily want to change minds or anything, but I wanted to just reframe the narrative about it a little bit because a lot of the implementations are used for different reasons than people might think they are. So my presentation is actually in the form of a video that I put together. It runs for about 18 minutes, and then I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to talk a little bit through the pitch correction that I use, which is the inbuilt one in Logic Pro 10, and do a demonstration of that. But that'll be after the video. So here we go. Way too long, yeah. It's way too long, it's way too long, it's way too long. I get those goosebumps every time. When you're not around, throw that to the side. The sound of my heart, the beat goes on and on and on and on and boom. You make me feel good. Come on to me now. Hello, my only one, just like the morning sun. You keep on rising till the sky knows your name. In a modern musical context, we largely expect both recorded and live performance to sound, for want of a better word, perfect. Not only are we accustomed to hearing music that is exquisitely produced and presented at the highest quality, but we want it to also be free of any human error. In many ways, it's a strange expectation. Music, something so expressive and inherently human, is bound in its modern form by a demand for highly calculated accuracy. Nevertheless, numerous tools exist to help musicians satisfy said demand. When it comes to instruments, most of the means for tuning are built in. You can tune a guitar, or a piano, or a drum kit with ease, so you would. It's part of their very design. Vocalists, unfortunately, don't have that luxury. Even the very best and most technical singers can't achieve note-for-note precision. And in the past, the only way to correct this was by doing new takes or overdubbing the original recordings. The demand for a faster, more accurate solution was large. Many argued that continuous retakes and elongated recording sessions led to the elimination of emotive expression in a singer's performance. Bad singing interferes with the clear transmission of feeling. Luckily, in the late 90s, revolutionary technological development gave producers the ability to alter the pitch of an audio signal after it's generated. These processes are unified under the title of pitch correction. Pitch correction tools are software applications used to manipulate the pitch of an audio recording to snap it closer to the nearest perfect note, as measured by commonly accepted Western standards. This can be done chromatically, simply universally correcting notes, or within the range of a specific key. The obvious precursors to these sorts of technologies are the likes of the talkbox and the vocoder. Champions, my friends. Instruments which would take an audio signal and marry it to a specific pitch in a similar vein to pitch correction. These aren't the same thing though. They carry with them very distinctive characteristics associated with their sound. The one thing that pitch correction achieved, which no other software had accomplished, was the alteration of notes within a performance without overtly editing any other characteristics, unless this is the intention. Essentially, the human voice can still sound like the human voice when it's being pitch corrected. The mathematics behind the technology are complicated and had a rather unusual origin. Dr. Andy Hildebrand, the creator of Autotune, was first a geophysicist. He developed technologies that helped oil company Exxon interpret sonar data to find fuel deposits. He used audio to map the layers of the earth below its surface, sending sound waves and measuring the recorded reflections to assess the physical space. Spurred by his own passion for music, he realized that the same technology could be used to detect pitch, and he repurposed it into what would become autotune in the late 90s. Hildebrand hadn't been the only person trying to achieve this end goal. Previous attempts, based on the same fundamental mathematics, had failed, but Hildebrand perfected the computations and debuted his software at a trade show in 1997 to widespread acclaim. It was Cher that brought the effect into the mainstream with her 1998 hit Believe, which prominently features an auto-tune vocal in the chorus.
Do you believe in life after love? I can feel something inside me say, I really don't think you're strong enough, no. Do you believe in life after love?
Her producers, Mark Taylor and Brian Walling, initially tried to keep it a trade secret, but it wasn't long before the technology started to filter through the industry. Competitors quickly emerged, all resembling auto-tune in some way, but with many providing their own features. For example, Melodyne is a staple pitch correction software, as widespread as auto-tune these days, which purports to have a more natural sounding tone. While auto-tune is often described as a real-time process, Melodyne has huge power as a post-production tool, mapping each note onto a graphical interface that can be manipulated in a number of specific ways. As such, it is widely used as a more subtle, corrective form of pitch correction. Most digital audio workstations have their own proprietary pitch correction tools, and many even exist as freeware, like G-Snap. Hardware units from manufacturers like Boss and TC Electronic also exist, but are based on software internally. Paul Presto Jr. and Robert Edgman describe the technology as cosmetic surgery for the voice, and I see this as an apt description. Just as cosmetic surgery can range from a slight facelift to a major transformative operation, autotune can be applied to provide minor alterations to vocals or to augment pitch significantly and even change the texture of the vocals. One of the most significant features is the retune setting, which alters the speed with which the software snaps vocals to the nearest note. Set to a higher value, vocals are tuned less abruptly, preserving the more human tone of the vocals. A zero setting produces the sound we most commonly associate with pitch correction, eliminating pitch variations in an instant and adding an almost robotic quality as a side effect. Think of natural singing as a series of curves in which we bend and slide between notes. A retune speed of 0 turns these all into right angles. You're likely very familiar with how this sounds. This is the setting that Cher used, and the one that defines much of what we recognize as autotune if we are to hear it generally. Because of the variety of pitch correction plugins, they are immensely detailed in terms of features. Most can affect things like vibrato and formant too. Put simply, pitch correction tools have a lot of potential for influence on vocal recordings.
Every time you see me ballin', all my old bitches callin', pull up in exotic, see a little bitch jockin', tryna get saved, she wanna get saved, I ain't gon' save her, tryna get.
Pitch correction presents something rather unique within popular music, a tool which has a very short 20-year history when we consider the vast quantities of music in the modern era, yet one with such ubiquity that it's often easier to assume it exists in a recording than thinking it's absent. For comparison, pedals for inclusion in drum setups took 75 years to be mass-produced after their creation in the mid-19th century. Nowadays, Hildebrand attests that the ubiquity of pitch correction is clear not because you can hear it, but because nobody can sing in tune as well as the songs on the radio would have you believe. That's not to say there was no experimental period for pitch correction. While Cher introduced the sound to the ears of a mainstream audience in a very obvious way, producers and artists began subtly trialing various implementations in their work not long after. In April 2000, French producer Merway put out the first song with a fully auto-tuned vocal on his album Production. He introduced the software to Madonna, who began implementing it in her work. A year later, Daft Punk used it on their album Discovery and Radiohead on their album Amnesiac. These instances of pitch correction sowed the seeds for its public acceptance. But still, these were sparse, experimental choices. No one had yet used pitch correction confidently as an artistic decision. Perhaps inevitably, It was a new artist who had to convince audiences to respond to the emotive and tuneful potential of this tool, as the only one with the inspiration and charisma to wield it in a novel fashion. In December 2005, T-Pain released Rapper Turned Singer, a commercially and critically successful record featuring the most overt stylistic use of pitch correction in the music community up until that point. T-Pain claims to have studied the technology with its creator, Dr. Hildebrand, years before his record was released to the world. And when it was polarizing and stark, a genuinely inspired case study into autotune's ability as an emotive instrument. It's fairly well documented in 2019 that T-Pain can actually sing very, very well. Rapper Turned Singer implements pitch correction heavily, yes, but with a selectivity and nuance to its implementation that perhaps isn't as clear in the output of his imitators in years to come. And there certainly were imitators. Snoop Dogg and Lil Wayne dropped their first auto-tune tracks in consecutive years following T-Pain's mainstream emergence. And of course, hip-hop's auto-tune masterclass record, 808s and Heartbreak, debuted in 2008. Kanye West made his name as an innovator in hip-hop. His acceptance of the technology gave it a mark of legitimacy that was perhaps the precursor to the wide and varied usage of the technology we now see in and around the world of hip-hop. Whereas earlier Kanye records found him precise in his lyricism and eclectic in his grandiose production, the use of pitch correction on 808s gave the singer a melodic instrument that allowed him to emote in a deeper way, with a minimalistic palette that let his melancholy tunes lead. Chris DeVille described 808s as a sacred text for many of hip-hop's mainstays, like Travis Scott, Post Malone, and Lil Uzi Vert. And while this genre may see the most persistent usage, there are plenty of examples of this overt aesthetic pitch correction across numerous spheres of music. No new technology emerges without some sort of backlash or commentary. Musicians in France tried to ban the synthesizer in the late 1970s, saying that it took jobs away from real musicians. Imagine where we'd be without it today. Daft Punk very astutely noted in their addressing of the auto-tune issue that humans are often afraid when confronted with something new. And sure enough, as pitch correction emerged, so did the movement against it. Years before T-Pain, albums started arriving with stickers plastered on them, explicitly stating that no pitch correction software was used in the recording process. Critics began to describe it as a sinister invention, an attack on the authenticity of popular music. Steve Albini, responsible for records by Pixies and Nirvana, compared those who used pitch correction to being like zombies, discussing his personal hurt when he saw artists he liked drawn in by the tech. Death Cab for Cutie arrived at the Grammys in 2009, wearing blue ribbons to openly signify their opposition to pervasive pitch correction, with frontman Ben Gibbard saying, "Over the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of good musicians being affected by this newfound digital manipulation of the human voice, and we feel enough is enough." This almost positions pitch correction as a villain, and natural vocals as the victim in some sort of imaginary crime. Paul Presto Jr. likens it to a disease. He argues that a little glide or dredge here and there adds character to a singer's sound, and that we need to keep authentic vocals untainted by machines, as we're not doing any favours by letting supposedly inadequate singers think they're good. In the same year as Death Cab for Cutie statement, Jay-Z's The Blueprint 3 featured a track titled Death of Autotune, where he quite clearly takes down rappers for T-Paining too much. Christina Aguilera was seen in autumn of the same year sporting a t-shirt that stated "Autotune is for pussies," notably around the same time that the Black Eyed Peas' Boom Boom Pow was dominating global charts. The common theme of most criticism is that pitch correction takes away from authenticity, implying that talent and artistic value cannot exist where things like autotune and melodyne do. Should we accept this idea to be true, then we certainly do have something to be concerned about. The overwhelmingly pervasive nature of pitch correction is an undeniable truth. One only has to point blindly at the charts to see numerous examples of melodyne-tinged vocal production. It's as much a part of the sound of the radio as the synthesizer is nowadays. In The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, Walter Benjamin presents the idea of advanced techniques of production and manufacturing infringing on the ability to produce authentic works. To many, the presentation of imperfections is an indicator of authenticity. But if we're to hold imperfections up as some bastion of real music, then we can't ignore that decades of development in recording technology have worked towards serving the exact same purpose as pitch correction, which is the eradication of error. Because studio recordings are so meticulously crafted, the perfection of recorded music is now seen as the standard for quality and the best possible representation of an authentic work. So some may argue that it's hypocritical and in many ways counterproductive to demonize pitch correction when it really is a natural product of years of development in recording processes. In short, the audience really can't have it both ways. Regardless of this discourse, pitch correction's dismissal as some sort of demonic fad was greatly misplaced, as its place in studios and live performances across the globe is guaranteed in this day and age. Let's consider then the T-Pain style implementation as an overt aesthetic choice. Rather amusingly, T-Pain began using autotune because when he started singing instead of rapping, he wanted to sound different. He wanted to make his voice into an instrument. Similarly, Matty Healy of the 1975 notes that autotune compresses and punctuates voices, allowing him to use it as an additional form of instrumentation. Rolling Stone commented on Kanye's use of the technology on 808s, noting its ability to enhance vocal expressiveness and create increased pathos, or pity, for Kanye, who on this record was trying to convey an intense sense of isolation and grief. These overt instances of pitch correction serve an integral aesthetic and emotive purpose. They are not there to fix the recording or cheat the listener. They are the recording, as important to the end product as a specific guitar tone, for example. Perhaps due to the widespread acclaim of artists utilizing the tool, or maybe a greater industry understanding of its place in recordings, what was once a large outcry of denouncers has mostly dwindled into a vocal minority.
Ever since we was on, I dreamed it all. Ever since I was young, they say I won't be nothing. Now they always say congratulations.
So much of our culture has a postmodern leaning. Society is mediated by cyborg habits that we have. Our images airbrushed and edited with filters, and our thoughts condensed into 280 characters. Pitch correction as an artistic inevitability doesn't seem so absurd in the company of these lived truths. Simon Reynolds wrote, "When everything else in culture is digitally maxed out and hyper-edited, how could the human voice stay unscathed? The sheen of autotune fits an entertainment landscape of high-definition screens, retina-wrenching 3D camera movements, motion retouching, and grading that sands down skin tones into porcelain perfection and makes colors pop with hallucinatory vividness. In essence, as people with digital lives, we get digital art." While I myself am respectful of art enough to understand the sentiments behind criticisms of pitch correction, I think that these sorts of reactions come from a place of simply not recognizing what it does and why it's actually used. When we look at a piece of art, a sculpture or a painting perhaps, the question of how the artist formed the shapes and colors or how they got the paint on the canvas is usually far less important than what the art conveys and what the perceived quality is at the end. To me, it seems only natural to apply the same mentality to pieces of music produced with pitch correction. When you make great music, its quality supersedes the tools used in its creation. Critics think pitch correction exists in opposition to real talent, but the two are often complementary. If you use it, you still have to work. You still have to write a good song. And arguably, because of pitch correction, there are more good songs out there in the world than ever before. So really, what's the problem?
Everything I used in the video was
cited in full in the write-up. So,
are you going to send us a copy of the video as well?
I can do, yeah. I tried to put it on YouTube, but because of all the music in it that I didn't own, YouTube blocked it. So
Right.
I'm going to have to figure out another way to get it on the internet. But yeah, I'll sort that out.
Okay.
Okay, so in terms of the pitch correction that I'm going to be demonstrating, this is the proprietary one that's built into Logic Pro. It's pretty powerful. It's one that I've used in my own band's music, but I've never used it in a live context. And as we discovered on Tuesday, I think it was, there's quite a bit of latency when I actually use it live. So if I try and demonstrate, well, this is how the plugin looks. So the song that I'm going to be performing is in D major. So I've set it to that scale there. I think, can you hear it there? Hello. I'm not sure.
Get the volume up a bit.
Should I turn it up?
Yeah.
Quite clearly there.
So there's quite a bit of latency
just because of the information that needs to be processed. So you can see here all the options that you can use. This is the retune setting that I mentioned in the video. So say I put it the response time really slow.
You can very subtly hear what it's doing, but not in a very specific way.
And then if I put it all the way back up, it makes that robotic tone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the pitch correction momentarily and then record myself live and then play it back with the pitch correction just to demonstrate the effect. So here we go. Am I gonna feel this forever? It's been months and you're not leaving my system. I think you're my peace, my point of clarity. I poison everything, you are the antidote to me. I lied to you when I said I came for atmosphere. In truth, I feel the same with just you here. You are with them in a heartbeat. We're arm in arm and I can't breathe. And you can't leave me be. I know that things will fix themselves eventually. You're too close, but I need you here. If you go, I will miss you, dear. I will miss you, dear. I will miss you, dear. Am I gonna feel this forever? It's been months and you're not leaving my system. My system. I will miss you, dear. Okay, so there was some sharp and flat notes in that, not intentionally, but hopefully the pitch correction will fix it. So this is actually an original song from my band, which we do use pitch correction for on the record just as an aesthetic choice. Am I gonna feel this forever? It's been months and you're not leaving my system. I think you're my peace, my point of clarity. I poison everything, you are the antidote to me. I lied to you when I said I came for atmosphere. In truth, I feel the same with just you here. You are with them in a heartbeat. We're arm in arm and I can't breathe. And you can't leave me be. I know that things will fix themselves eventually. You're too close, but I need you here. If you go, I will miss you, dear. I will miss you, dear. I will miss you, dear. Am I gonna feel this forever? It's been months and you're not leaving my system. My system. I will miss you, dear. I think some of those notes corrected wrongly just because I might not have got the exact right key of the song. That's just my mistake. Yeah, that's me done really. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, it sounded like that. I will miss.
That was sharp, wasn't it? I'm not quite.
Can you go and see a grid now of where
that's what I wanted to.
how it's affected it?
I'm not sure what I've done there.
Am I gonna feel this forever? It's been months and you're not leaving my system. I think you're my beast.
Oh, it's actually in G major, isn't it? So yeah, it's doing C sharps where it wants to be C naturals.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure what that is then, because it's meant to say G major.
Put in G, root G, yeah? That would.
Yeah, I think so.
Try it again.
I said it's in the songs in G major.
Clarity, I poison everything, you are the antidote to me. I lied to you when I said I came for atmosphere. In truth, I feel the same with just you. And you are with them in a heartbeat. We're arm in arm and I can't breathe. And you can't leave me be. I know that things will fix themselves eventually. You're too close, but I need you here. If you go, I will miss you, dear.
Aaron, if you the response slider.
Yes.
So if you take that up to slow, it gradually get less pronounced.
In truth, I feel the same with just you. And you are with them in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Okay.
We're arm in arm and I can't
Yes, so that's like that would still be kind of like it would still have tuned your voice up a little bit.
But if you listen for it, you can hear that it's being.
Yeah, but it's far less obvious, isn't it? And I when you listen to a lot of music in the charts and you listen to it, you think, oh well, that's not obviously auto-tuned.
Yeah.
It probably is
It
with a really kind
probably
of
is,
soft
yeah.
attack.
Yeah, definitely.
'Cause I know we used to do that with the long pigs in the final years when it was really kind of in its infancy.
Yeah, yeah.
But what you'd do is you'd sing it and you'd work out which note was slightly out and really literally just zoom in on that.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
you'd have to do it note by note.
So that's
Yeah,
something.
and it may be that in a vocal performance you've got everything sounding natural and you've only used auto-tune pitch correction on two notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what you would use like Melodyne.
Is that
Yeah,
how Melodyne
Melodyne.
works?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I use Melodyne at home, but I don't have it on this laptop. So, but yeah, it's more of like a sort of post-production thing. A lot of artists use auto-tune live when they're performing with it
So
in the studio.
How would this is going to sound a bit mad, but because the notes that you sang, when you sang them, were pretty much in tune, weren't they?
Yeah.
So it's setting it too fast is kind of you're using it as an effect, aren't you?
Yeah.
But it's adjusting the notes to notes that are really very, very similar to the ones that you sang.
Yeah.
If you put say B flat in, how would it adjust the notes then? What would that sound like?
It would sound all over the place, wouldn't it?
Would it actually?
Yeah, it would tune them to like
The nearest next note.
Yeah, if you put it on B flat, then it'll sound like in B minor, A sharp.
I know that things will fix themselves eventually. You're too close, but I need you here. If you go, I will miss you, dear.
I think what it's doing there is because it's you don't ever sit on the third.
Yeah, no, right,
So
okay.
it's just
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
it to the fourth because
Yeah.
that's nearer.
Yeah.
Because with the slur,
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want me to try?
But yeah, I mean, I always think of it as there's that quote from Duke Ellington: "If it sounds good, it is good."
Yeah.
So and it doesn't really matter. I agree with what you said there. The process that you go through is really kind of neither here nor there. It's what it sounds like in the end. And if it, and there's there's good reggae and bad reggae, and there's good hip hop and bad hip hop, or there's hip hop that you don't like for certain reasons and hip hop that you do, and the same with auto tune. There's some examples of auto tune or pitch correction where it sounds rubbish and some where it sounds great.
I mean, and that's what you did then was specifically as an effect, wasn't it? Because you actually didn't really need to use it. Your take was pretty much in tune, or from what I heard you singing it. So it's much more of a specific texture to go with that.
Yeah.
I think if someone's a really who sings like really inaccurately, it's gonna sound or pitch corrected, isn't it? You know what I mean? If you kind of consistently sharp and flat, and you go both ways, then it's not going to be ideal.
No.
Because it's going to sound like that, unless you want to sound R&B and hip hop style. So it's probably not going to help you if you're a hopeless singer. But if you're a really good singer who occasionally is a little bit sharp and flat, like we all are, then it is going to, and the argument is that if when you're making a recording, you want it to be as best it possibly can. And my kind of retort to that would be, I personally don't mind if one or two notes are a little bit sharp or flat, if we get the good delivery and the good vocal. So I'm probably not as much of a perfectionist as you are in those terms.
But also there are I've used those kinds of things on bad instruments. For example,
well, like the trombone.
The trombone when it's out, it's always a little bit out of tune, especially if you can't play it that well, like me. So, it in terms of sort of pitch correction, putting three trombones together in tune. It's a
lifesaver.
It is cheating, but also it's the difference between
sounding shit and it's sounding good.
Yeah.
I rarely use it as a corrective sort of thing. Like, you have a lot of songs where it's just my natural voice and I don't really use a pitch correction on it, but I do like the aesthetic of it personally, which is why I put it on some tracks.
And I liked because it goes along with the comment that you said about people have been using effects pedals on guitar for years, and it's just the kind of start of being able to do something like that with a vocal that makes a specific sound happen that might sound unnatural to start with, but it actually does have it gives it a certain quality, and it puts me in mind of some of the vocoder things that Herbie Hancock was doing in the mid-70s when that sort of stuff first came out. Because I mean, he wasn't a singer, but he was a keyboard player, and he was using those kinds of things with quite wacky jazz voicings and stuff.
But yeah, thought it was very good. So yeah, thank you very much. Anything else you want to add? Okay, thank you very much.